Monty, can we start by saying welcome to Germany once again?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice to be back.
You said that sincerely?
Oh yes, I liked a great deal coming over to Germany.
What's the attraction of?
Well, it's a change. It means that I'm not doing the usual circuit in England. In fact, what happens is that I spend a little time in England doing what they call the sort of jazz circuit, and then we wander off onto the continent. And then we do a little bit there and then go home, so you don't overstay your welcome too much. So we split it one to the other.
Is the jazz scene different on the continent to UK?
Only as regards the drinking laws. Other than that, everyone I think drinks the same. But I find that over here you can get a drink any time, and that suits us.
On the continent, jazz is music for the masses, though, which it isn't in England anymore.
That's true, yes. Most of the clubs that you go to in England are virtually specialised places. People go along specifically for the jazz, whereas we play clubs in Germany which are just nice social centres, and the music can become incidental to other people's interests.
Yes.
But we try and make an interesting evening, and I think we all enjoy it all round.
But you get a big hall like this, where they play jazz this week and pop music next week. There's nothing even remotely like that in England, is there?
That's true, yes. I couldn't agree with you more, actually, because this Munster land, or Munster Halle, or what have you, attracts probably the same people for the pop concert as it probably would attract for the jazz concert.
Yes, exactly the same people, actually.
In England, this is the thing, that they have such broad outlook here, which I like. In England, we are specialised music, and one day I hope that it will keep that way all over, because I really think that because we're specialised, it makes it that little bit nicer.
You prefer?
I do, actually, yes, because I was on the sort of trad boom, as it were, and quite frankly, I could have done without it. I much preferred to play to people that came along to hear and be entertained by jazz musicians, as opposed to people just coming along and looking at freaks and wondering, what are they playing anyway?
Oh, you surprised me now.
No.
I thought you'd be one of those people who was hoping for the trad boom days to come back.
Oh, no, I don't want that. No, I much prefer to play to the audiences we're getting, where people are coming along and listening to the music as such, and enjoying themselves and asking us back, as opposed to playing to a mass of people who don't really know what's going on, and you'll never see them again in your life.
You were very much involved in the trad boom days.
Ironically, I wasn't.
Well,
you see, the thing is that during the period of the boom as such, I spent more time in America playing than I spent in England, where the trad boom existed. So it didn't really bother me too much. But when I did come back and sort of come in and saw what was happening, I was very thankful, quite frankly, that I had no part in it. Well, I probably instigated a part of it, but fortunately I wasn't there when it was all really happening.
What were you doing in America, promoting Petit Fleur?
Yes, I think that's probably what was happening, but we were trying to forget Petit Fleur, actually, and trying to play a little bit of jazz. And fortunately that mantle now has gone away. It's terrific. It's marvellous.
Was Petit Fleur a bit of a double-edged sword?
It was in some respects, because the true jazz fan as such thought it was a commercial gimmick, which really it wasn't. It was something that a tune that I particularly liked, and it was a tune that was composed by a jazz musician, Sidney Bechet, and I enjoyed it. I played it, and I thought, well, let's just record it. And we put it on, recorded it, and forgot about it. For 18 months, nothing happened. It was on a long playing record in England, and then it came over to Germany, and they put it out as a single, and it didn't stop. It just went on and on and on, right across to America, in the hit parade in America, and then it came back to England nearly 2 years later in the hit parade. So, full cycle.
So it broke in Germany first?
Oh, yes, that was the place, in Germany. And from Germany to America, then back to England.
What were the world sales for that?
I think it was something like 2.5 million. Yeah, try not to think big.
So you've had 2 gold discs for it then?
Yes, I have. Yeah, hanging up in my home in London. Yeah.
Oh, you went to America, and not necessarily to promote Petit Flair. Most jazz musicians like to go to America or to Memphis.
Well, it's Mecca. It's Mecca.
Mecca, quite. What does one learn there?
Nothing. Because, strangely enough, the healthiest scene is in Europe. And quite frankly, I don't think you can learn all that much, because your apprenticeship basically is listening to the records that are made, at a period when it was really at its peak, probably from about the 30s through to about the middle 40s. And after that, regrettably, a lot of them have died, the men that made this thing. So when you go to America, basically, it's such a huge country, and yet you can count 20 men that are really doing anything in the sort of style that we play. The sort of Dixieland style, things like that.
Well, if you go down to Memphis and thereabouts, surely there are people there who never achieve notoriety or fame, who are carrying on the old traditions of...
No, well, if you get down to New Orleans, yes, they're still there, but the thing is that they're very old, and they're trying to remember these things, and they're not playing all that regularly, and it just doesn't work. You're looking at images, really.
So there's nothing you can learn from them?
Oh, you can learn. You can always learn. Oh God, I'm always learning from not just those guys down in New Orleans. I'm learning from other musicians anyway. So you mustn't stop learning. Oh no.
What kind of thing would you learn from, say, from the New Orleans people?
Well, you could learn time, which is a very important factor in New Orleans music and Dixieland. The sense of phrasing. You can listen, and each man possesses this time, and you can pick a little bit up here and there.
Phrasing would be one of the main things.
Well, yes, and also to me, just hearing how they go about playing, and that's interesting. But you can find that anywhere in the world, really.
How about looseness or tightness of playing? I don't know which is to use.
Well, yeah, well, no, that comes by experience. It's like. Well, if you listen to any sort of form of music, you can express yourself certain ways, and this is exactly what these fellas do, and you try and approach it in that way, and try and analyse what they're doing. But actually, quite frankly, to go to any of these places is like hard work to any musician, because all he doesn't really enjoy himself. He's got one drink in one ear and one hand and cocking his ear to what's going on, and you walk out of there as though you've played a session. Not just necessarily in New Orleans, but anywhere. If you listen to other people playing, excuse me, you're really working.
So the best scene is on the continent then?
Well, I wouldn't say the best scene, but the thing is, it's very convenient to travel around, and playing-wise, it's very, very, very rewarding, and also it gives you a chance to show your music off. And then you go home, and you've been away a sufficient time for people not to be bored by the fact that you're back again. But with open arms, they invite you to play in places, and then when they get bored, you're away again. And the people on the continent say, oh, and so it goes. Life goes on.
How did you get into jazz in the first place?
Purely because a chap at the art school that I was at had bought a second-hand clarinet, and he couldn't make a sound out of it. And I flukily picked it up and made a bleat, and he said, right, he said, you can borrow that. And I took it home and kept bleating away on it, and that's why you find me here.
But when you first started bleating, obviously you thought there's only one way to find out what the clarinet should sound like. Listen to records by.
Oh, I was listening to records prior to this. This was the whole thing. I mean, I was interested in jazz prior to being a musician, or interested in being an exponent of it. Oh yes, I listened quite a lot, so I knew the fundamentals of what was required, you know, playing sort of New Orleans and Dixieland music. It was just a question of arriving at some method of making the clarinet do things, which is very hard. And I persevered, and I got a postcard from this guy who was away on holiday. I remember he was somewhere in Switzerland, and he sent me a postcard saying, "Forget about clarinet, you have it." And I kept it. And it was quite strange, because I was so excited about owning a clarinet that I came home one day and I had it in a paper bag, because I hadn't got a case for it, you see, and I ran up the stairs in my home and dropped it and broke the mouthpiece. And I thought, well, you had to take the mouthpiece and the clarinet to a shop and see if they would fit one. I didn't know that you just got a mouthpiece. I took the mouthpiece and clarinet to this very well-known music shop and said, you know, could you fit a mouthpiece for me? And the guy looked at me and said, yes, certainly. He said, but I'll have to take it down to the workshop. And I thought he was having me on, but he took it down there because he realised that the clarinet was the wrong shape, you know, wrong size. And he came back and he said to me, do you play on this clarinet? And I said, yeah. You know, because I didn't want to let on that I was just sort of about 3 weeks blowing on this. I said, yeah, of course I do. He said, you must be joking. I said, no, I play on it. I just want a mouthpiece fitted. He said, well, let me just tell you that the top half of this clarinet belongs to an A clarinet, and the bottom part is a B flat clarinet. And if you play on it, you're a better man than I am. Yeah? And I said, well, never mind, still give me a mouthpiece. Which he did. Gave me this mouthpiece, and I went off and gaily practiced on this thing. I actually joined a band. Yeah. So anyway, when I could afford it, I bought another clarinet, which was a metal clarinet made by Hawks, not Boozy and Hawks. It was a very old metal clarinet that the army used to issue to their troops out in the sort of Middle East and Far East, because wooden clarinets would crack in the heat, so they especially built these metal clarinets. And I remember after a while kept playing on this metal clarinet. People used to say, but do you actually play? I said, yeah. Well, it looks very funny from the side, and I realised that I was bending it, and it looked like a great big crossbow in my mouth, because one hand was one side and the other bit was below sort of my stomach. So we had to get rid of that. But fortunately, you know, I've got a few now which are not bad.
What did you ever do with the first one?
I don't really. I think I sort of flogged it. I'm not quite sure. More than likely gave it away. I can't remember offhand. Can't remember. I'd hate to think who's got it anyway.
Obviously a pop man.
Oh, no, I don't know. It's probably
like different.
Firewood now. Firewood. It's probably rotted somewhere.
Well, in those say formative years when you were learning the clarinet, what clarinet has impressed you most? Who did you learn from?
All of them, really, seriously, all of them, and I still do. You know, people ask me this question. I mean, I have sort of odd little favourites that I would like to go back to, but I listen to all clarinet players. You know, I have a sort of thing that I do at parties occasionally with friends when they put on obscure records, you know, jazz records, and I try within so many seconds to tell who the clarinet player is. I really do. I love clarinet players. I think it's a marvellous instrument.
But surely there must be one or two.
Oh, there are. I like Sidney Bechet, and I like Barney Bigard. I like George Lewis. I like Johnny Dodds. I like Albert Nicholas. These people have probably influenced me a great deal. But I still go out my way to lend an ear to all sorts of clarinet players.
Do you play any other instruments?
Well, I do. I sort of dabble, but basically I stay with the clarinet. I find it more rewarding, really.
What made you leave the Chris Barber outfit?
Well, it was probably over the years playing with with Chris and the boys that I suddenly found that the sort of music I had started playing with the band was suddenly disappearing a little bit, and we arrived at the conclusion that I should stay on my side of the road and they were going to move on to onto their sort of particular thing. But I see and hear now that gradually that movement is coming back to my side of the road, because I think you obviously have to experiment, but I don't think I'm that sort of experimenting type as such.
So when did you form your first band?
1961.
61. You'd been with Chris about 2 years then?
Oh, I've been with Chris about 9 years.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah. Long while. Yes, it was a cooperative band that was formed way back. And around about 1961 we decided, right, I'd stay playing the sort of things that I wanted to do, and Chris was doing this sort of experimental thing, which is very nice. I like it, but it's not the sort of thing that I particularly want to play, especially in my old age anyway.
Speaking of old age, do you envisage a day when you won't go out on the road anymore?
No, not at all. Not at all. Even my wife can't conceive that thought. She says, you won't pack it up, will you? I think she tries to get rid of me. No. No, I don't. I never think of it. Never. Not once.
I had a great fortune.
Nice to see you.
I had a great fortune many years ago, around about 1964, I think, to meet Louis Armstrong. And I asked him when he foresaw the day, if he did foresee the day when he would put the trumpet down, stop it all, he said, in his voice, the day I wake up, put out my hand, and I can't pick up that cornet, that's the day I'm going to stop.
Well, that's it.
That's how you feel
I do. I really do. I can't possibly ever visualize stop playing. I really couldn't. Even, my parents say to me, do you like going out? I say, yes, I do. And my father, he rejoices in the fact that I actually get around the places that I go to. He's, I think it's a marvellous thing.
Obviously, you spend a long time on the road.
I do.
How much of the year?
Well, we spend quite a lot on the road, but also we spend quite a bit at home, because when we're in England, it's up and down, and the motorways are so good. You can be home and you can be with your children all day long, and then you can go off on the road again and be back again. I've never really sat down and worked out the mileage we did, or how often we're away. But I think over the period it's sort of half and half. But it's better than a 9-to-5 job anyway.
Yes, of course. When you first started the band, did you have any particular ambitions regarding the band's success?
No, I don't think you do. I don't think you sort of go into these things and say, well, I'm going to be the greatest in the world. I think you go into it and say, I want to swing along and do things in a particular way. And I think your moment of glory comes when you sort of step off the bandstand, having played a good swinging session, and that's your reward, within yourself. And if it isn't, when once that sort of period comes where you think, well, man, that's, hard and, and grimy and what have you, well, then you start sort of doing what Louis did, start looking for his trumpet again.
What draws you to wanting to run a band, change the band's nappies and have all that worry, rather than being a sideman?
Well, I don't think I ever was a sideman, strangely enough, because when I was with Chris, it was a cooperative band, and I had always had probably a far-reaching thought about the band policy and things, and it was a sort of, we all sort of contributed because of this cooperative thing, but I never ever felt, and I sincerely hope within my own band, obviously I have to decide yes or no finally, but I always try and make a point that I don't have to say, you've got to do it. It's a thing. Jazz has a very tremendous democracy within itself. So I think everyone, all the sidemen are all potential band leaders, really.
Why do you want to be the front man?
I don't really want to be the front man. I would like to stand behind the rhythm section and play, so then I don't get all the brickbats that, you know, sometimes you can get within yourself. It'd be nice to have the rhythm section out front, zooming away, and you kicking them along behind. Because people always think, well, there's those glamour fellas, they're out there, and those poor chaps behind, they don't get any, you know, kudos at all. But in reality, we're all working as a steam engine, really. So, no, I'm not worried about being out front.
Stephen Capelli was telling me last month, I think it was, that he sees big band jazz coming back in a very, very big way in the next year or two.
Yes.
Will that bring small groups like yourself back?
Well, we have not
into prominence.
I know what you mean. Yes. No, I don't think it's a question of big bands coming back. They're still there. They're still about. But they're not getting. I mean, you've got Basie and you've got Woody Herman, etc. That do wonderful things playing wise. No, I think what's actually happening is that there's a void at the moment as regards popular music as such in musically. You know, I'm not talking about the pop stars as such, but purely instrumentally. And big band jazz not only has the impact orally, it has a visual thing as well, of seeing sort of 20 guys up there swinging like mad, and the sound is enormous. And I don't know whether it's regrettably or not, but the youngsters today are sound conscious.
Very much so.
So the thing is that when you get a big band up there producing a sound, big, huge sound, musically as such, I'm not decrying the beat groups or anything like that, but just producing a huge sound, I think people are beginning to wonder, where's this all coming from? You know, and I think there is an interest, yes. And as regards your second point, as regards the smaller group, well, always, the big band always carried the smaller group, and the smaller group gave the contrast. So, you know, it's marvellous, really. Except one occasion, I'm going to digress for a second. You just reminded me of something. I remember many years ago when I was with Chris, we played somewhere in the north of England, and we were the accompanying band, and there was about 7 of us, and we had to go on first, and the big band of the evening was going to come on second, and we did our first spot, and the big band came on, and the big band was the Hedley Ward Trio. Well, I mean, they were popular, and they were the big band, you see. So, I mean, it's really the sublime to the ridiculous.
It is a bit, actually. I remember the Hedley Ward Trio.
Yeah, they were top of the bill. They were the big band.
I know why I remember them as well. Because they were so bad.
No, don't say that.
No, that's not fair. That's put me off. You're digressing now. It's put me off what I was going to say. Yes, if such a thing should happen, that the big bands come back in and therefore the small bands come along in on the crest of the wave, so to speak.
Yes.
People are going to, well, the record company's going to ask all the popular names to start making singles. Would you indulge?
No, I would never chase singles. I don't believe in that sort of thing, quite frankly. I don't think that you just go into a studio and say, well, I'm going to now record a popular hit, because we don't play that sort of music. What we can do is play in our own way, and people take note and say, well, that would be interesting, and maybe the record company would like to make an album and then select their own particular things from it if they felt that it warranted to become a single. I don't think you go into a studio as a jazz band, because primarily this is what I'm interested in, and go in and say, right, I am now going to record a hit. Then you're just chasing shadows. There's no point at all.
If you should have a hit, how would you react to it?
Well, I would be very, very pleased, because it would prove to me that people, A, were interested in the sort of thing that I was interested, because I would have to be very interested to produce a single. You know, seriously, and if this happened, then I would be flattered 100%, and I would rejoice in it.
Yes, but then of course you'd have to go through the promotion thing.
Well, yes,
through the whole mill then.
Well, I've been through it before, and you know, I would I'm sure that I could go through it quite sensibly, and all the glamour as such doesn't bother me too much.
Would you welcome the glamour a bit?
I'm glamorous now.
No, I mean getting the full treatment from TV and...
Well, that's immaterial, because I think if you've got a product that is saleable, which I know what we do and what other bands do, it's saleable. And if the television people would only just cast their eyes around and their ears around, they've got saleable products that they're really letting waste. So that doesn't bother me, as regards the television coming along and saying, well, that single that you've got, we'd like to use the band. We might be a band of, well, twisted guys, you don't know, visually horrible to look at, but the music counts. So.
But a hit single would then put you in the position where, put you in the position you have now, the England-Germany thing. You'd then be playing to the masses who didn't really...
Well, yes, then we're going full cycle again, you see. We're going back to this trad boom thing that we started out with, and what happens then is that you keep your head above water and still produce good music. And this is, after all, the end product of what we're doing all the while. So, you're not going to change your way of life.
No.
In fact, I might even buy my wife a smaller house. I think that was somewhere anyway.
What exactly is trad jazz?
Oh man, you really need a long program for that. It's traditional jazz, really, is what you're saying. But basically, I don't think we play trad jazz. I think we try and play jazz of a sort, probably in between sort of Dixieland and New Orleans music. It's extemporized, melodic, rhythmic, and interesting, entertaining, sustaining, melodious, beautiful music.
It's a lot of descriptive adjectives.
Yes.
One thinks of trad jazz as belonging to an era, so therefore all the compositions must come out of that era. It must belong to the 1920s. Or
No. Traditional jazz actually came out of an era between 1956 and 1964. That was traditional jazz, or trad jazz. The jazz and the Dixieland and New Orleans music started, as you say, from around about the 20s and crept up to that 50 period. And that's the music I'm basically interested in, and was interested. This sort of ogre that appeared afterwards from the 56 to 64, that is trad jazz. The music we play, or what I think the better bands play, is the real emulation of good musical background, the American music, really. But we're playing it as a second line emulators, not the innovators. I mean, the innovators were in that period. Yes. So this is what we're trying to do: recreate a period music. And as you say, particular tunes came from that period. But you could also take present day tunes and utilize them into the music that you're playing now.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, actually, would you take tunes by present-day composers outside of the jazz world?
Oh yes, providing that it had the right ingredients. You see, you just can't, you can extemporize on most things, but the format of playing Dixieland or New Orleans music requires particular voicing, and therefore you've got to be selective in the material that you're using. So,
is there anybody nowadays writing music which you could adapt fairly easily?
Well, I'm sure that most of the sort of good melodic writers today, that the forefront is the sort of strong melody, could always be adapted to jazz music. Hoagy Carmichael, way back in the 30s, produced wonderful melodic tunes that lend themselves beautifully. The same applies to Cole Porter and Gershwin, etc. You can use this material, and then the present day there's all sorts of people really that you can extemporize and utilize the music that they're doing.
Is there anybody?
Well, even the Beatles.
The Beatles.
Yes. Baccarat. There's these people that did the Jesus Christ Superstar. All these lend themselves beautifully to the sort of symphonic approach to the the music that we do.
Do you use any music by contemporary composers?
No, I basically, years ago, I used to sort of do a lot of things in that field, but now I like to go right back to the grassroots and play the more standard of the tunes, because I think that these are tunes that the youngsters should really hear. They're hearing the present day things played by particular pop groups, etc. I like to leave that field to them and go right back to the people that were the instigators, to the innovators for their way of playing. So I like to get youngsters come up and say, wasn't that a beautiful tune? Who wrote it? And when you tell them it was written in 1922, they're quite amazed. And it's a jazz standard, you see. But they like it. It's much better than hearing us probably strangle a present day tune purely in the sense that we feel we've got to get across to the youngsters. It's much nicer to do it the other way.
So you try and convert them to your kind of music?
Exactly. Well, this is it. Then sort of step out a little bit and take various things purely as a gimmickry thing, you know, and say, well, we can do this, but basically we can't. You've got to leave music in its right slots, I think.
The reason for your popularity on the continent, especially in Germany, could it be the similarity between jazz music and the traditional Bavarian Umpau music?
Not really, because we try and get so much away from it that it's not true that, in the sense rhythmically, we try to keep it a lot subtler in the sense of the rhythm. I can see the point of the Bavarian influence, because after all it went right down to New Orleans, and even the New Orleans jazzmen right down, you know, in the deep south were playing martial music, marches. The New Orleans street parades are basically on the military side and the military aspect of playing. All these instruments were left behind from the Civil War, and they themselves were only emulating the sounds they heard from the cavalry and the bands marching through the streets. So you had, at that time, you got ragtime, and these rags went into the military music as well. There are even parts in rags that are very martial, very military. Well, it's another aspect of the music. See?
Can I give you a final question, an impossible one? Who's the greatest jazz man of all time for you?
The greatest jazz man of all time for me? Well, it would have to be Sidney Bechet.
Not because of Petit Fleur?
No. Pure. Well, I like to hear the reeds. You know, if you said to me what was the greatest reed man, I would say Sidney Bechet. The greatest trumpet player, well, I love Louis Armstrong and George Mitchell. And trombone, I like Kid Ory and Jack Teagarden. So I take a pretty broad view on most of the people playing.
But the single one musician?
Single one, I adored Sidney Bechet. Yes, I thought he was a tremendous musician, as a composer and as a musician. And